I'm here.
I can hear you.
Right, good evening.
Defend live.
Good evening and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting. Pauline Hellier-Simons can't be here, so I'm going to be chairing the meeting tonight. I'm Alison Swaddle. Other councillors present, we have Jenny Cheng, Andy Croy, Paul Fishwick, Jim Fruin, Guy Granderson, Sarah Kerr, Abdul Loys, Ken Mile, Andrew Mickleborough, Rochelle Shepherd-Dubé, and substituting for Oliver Whittle is Councillor Emma Hobbs this evening. Can I ask you all to remember that this meeting is being broadcast, and could you keep your microphone muted unless you're about to speak or are speaking, and could you put your camera on only when you're speaking? And I'd ask that to officers also when you're speaking. We'll go round councillors in alphabetical order to ask questions rather than using the hand up function. When we need to vote, I will ask you all to put your microphones on, and then we will whip round for you to say for, against or abstain. Neil, is there anything else I should have mentioned? No, so perhaps I've covered it all. Right, do we have any apologies?
As you mentioned, Chairman, Pauline Hellier-Simons and Oliver Whittle and Emma Hobbs is here as a substitute.
Thank you. Members, let us turn to the minutes of previous meetings. First of all, the meeting held on the 22nd of July. Does anybody have any corrections to the minutes or matters arising?
Matters arising from myself, and I know Sarah was going to say exactly the same thing. So Sarah, you can go.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just about picking up on some actions. I believe we were supposed to have some specific guidance, firstly with regards to the outbreak control plan as members, and I don't believe I've seen anything. I'm not sure if anyone else has, but I'd like to follow up on that. We were supposed to have some training on unauthorised encampments. I'd like to follow up with that, please. Progress as to how the unauthorised encampment leaflets is coming along, and also when we're going to do the business case for the transit site, please.
And also to add to the travellers, there was going to be an update to the website and the information contained on it. I've just spent 20 minutes trying to find things on there. There is no mention at all yet. So
no mention of what?
There's no update for any traveller information whatsoever.
Okay, well, we'll have to take that back to the officers. Neil, can you follow that up? I'm just looking at the resolutions from that item in the agenda. And we did agree in number 7, the provision of additional information and guidance to the public and private landowners. And as Sarah says, the business case should be submitted. That was in number 5. Where did we specifically ask for training?
There's a report issued on the 22nd of July, which contains some updates, and in there it commits to dates for training by August, and also the leaflet to be online with other information by the 30th of July.
I'm looking at the minutes at the moment, Jim.
Yeah, sorry, it was follow-up from the minutes.
It's on page 11, Chairman.
Yeah, it's
number 8.
Yes, I was just about to say number 8. The
proposed the proposed annual sessions be supported. Has any training commenced yet, Neil?
I don't know about any of those points raised. I don't think the training's happened, but I'll take it up with officers tomorrow and send round an update to all the members of the committee by email.
Yes. Sarah, let's pick this up again in the forward plan, because I think possibly looking at training for members would be very worthwhile, you know, in all areas.
Yep, no worries.
Yep. So has anybody got any corrections to the minutes of the 22nd of July? Andrew, you got your hand up. Andrew Mickleborough? No, you put your hand down. Okay. Right, now looking at the minutes from the call-in meeting, have we got any corrections or comments on the meeting held on the 22nd of August? Okay, nobody's got their hand up. May I take it that we are happy to approve those minutes and to move on to declaration of interest? Does anybody have a declaration of interest for the items on the agenda this evening? No. Okay, public question time, Neil.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Member question time.
None received.
Right, okay, on to item 34, which is the Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group report. Now, this was chaired by me, and I'd like to thank very much the members of the Task and Finish Group. That's Andy Croy, Andrew Mickleborough, Malcolm Richards and Keith Baker. I don't think Keith could be with us this evening. I hope you've all had time to read the report. We had a lot of meetings. I think it says 7, but I think we had 8 with the one to consider the report and following our discussions after we presented it to Gregor and Rhiann. I think Rhiann's with us this evening. So members, Rhiann's here so she can speak about her comments on the plan. Rhiann's not here to be scrutinised by the committee. What we're doing this evening is considering the report, and I hope you will support the recommendations that we made, which quite a few. I think we got to 13, I believe. We did finally add some more, and support that those recommendations are taken to the executive in October, and I very much hope that they will agree to put those into action. I'm going to assume that everybody has read our report because I don't want to go through it step by step. So I thought I would suggest that we went through the recommendations. Sorry, Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Oh, it was just in preparation for asking some questions. So shall I take it down now and do it in a minute?
That's fine. Yeah, you can be first. Okay. But we were going to go round alphabetically. Do you remember?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure everybody's going to have questions. Right, so recommendation number 1 came out of the Task and Finish Group. That's councils work with schools, businesses and community stakeholders to develop a vision for net zero borough with indicators and milestones to demonstrate the progress. A vision was something we thought was very necessary, to have a clear vision of where we wanted to be by 2030, you know, and how we were going to achieve it. So, alphabetically. Abdul, do you have anything you wanted to ask? Andy? You were part of the group, so is there anything you wanted to say on recommendation number 1?
I think we should accept all the recommendations, obviously. That'll probably save a few contributions later on.
Okay,
I don't really have any questions. I've done a lot.
Right, we'll let the members who weren't part of the group.
Probably skip me for the time being. Yeah.
Okay. Emma Hobbs.
I don't actually have any comment. I think it's very well written. My praises go to you all in this group, because it must have been a very difficult subject to discuss. The only question I might have is, have we any idea of timings for the SMART targets?
Well, within the plan, you know, there's different targets for different sections. Some things have got a target to achieve, you know, in a year, 2 years, 5 years, or the end of the period. Do you want to be more specific?
Can I come back to you in a minute?
Yes, certainly.
Put my thoughts together.
Right. Okay. Actually, members, do you think it'd be better to just ask you if you want to discuss
Where are you?
our
Right.
report in general rather than going through 13 points?
This one? 34. Which
I'd
one?
be happy with that because I've got some specific comments on some of the recommendations, but I've also got a couple of more sort of general things as well I wanted to ask. So,
Okay, I'll tell you what, Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Madam Chairman. Could we ask that the people who are going to make recommendations, can they point out where they are making the recommendations, like 2.1 or 2.11, etc.?
Yes, that's a very good suggestion. Thank you, Emma. Okay, Sarah.
thanks. I just want to say I thought it's an excellent report, and you obviously, as a group, worked really, really hard on this. And I just want to thank you for the time that's been put into this. So I really enjoyed reading it. I've got some specifics on some of the recommendations. So firstly, on recommendation 1, I love the idea of the vision. My question is, could this not be part of the overall council plan, not just the vision for this action plan, but how that incorporates into the bigger picture? And with that, there's talking about the milestones to get there. Will the community referenced in this recommendation also help to develop the route to get there, part of those milestones? Because the key to this is going to be the engagement of the public, particularly on trickier areas, to get that change that's required. So, yes, my question is about getting it into the overall council vision.
Yeah, I think that's very important, Sarah, that not only does the council through the climate emergency plan have a vision, but yes, it needs to be part of our overall vision. And as you say, a huge part of achieving carbon zero is behaviour change. It's getting everybody in our borough, all our businesses, the residents, to, you know, look at what they're doing and to change. There's so many things that are outside the council's sphere of influence, and that was a big part of the report and something we often discussed. That, you know, so many things that we would like to see happening that weren't, you know, going to be directly within the capability of the borough to change. Rhiann, would you like to comment on that?
Hi there. Yes, I think we're looking at different ways that we can really try and engage the community. And one of the things we're looking at the moment is the possibility of perhaps doing a citizens' assembly. And it feels to me that if we were able to set that up, that might be a really good route or a really good per person project for them to get involved in doing. Sorry, I need to put my camera on. Hi there. So yes, yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good thing, and I think it's probably already included. There is a level of the climate emergency in the council's vision, but and I'll go back and have another discussion around that as well and see whether there's any remit for strengthening that. We've certainly done some really strong KPIs. We've just finished finalising as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Don't worry, I haven't got something on every recommendation, but on the second one, I think it is important that we do consider non-CO2 greenhouse gases. And I know that there's mention to the PM 2.5s from the motion that's gone through, and we're going to be monitoring those. I just wanted to ask if we could maybe tweak the wording ever so slightly, because particulate matter isn't classed as a greenhouse gas, because it's a solid particle. So I wanted to ensure that was still covered. And I'm wondering if we could just have, it would technically be classed as air pollution. If we could just have that added in. to that recommendation, please.
So what's the wording you'd suggest?
So you've got there that include recognition of the levels of non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in the borough, just to make sure that we're covering all bases. While I want to ensure that we tackle air pollution in its own right, there are obviously, and a lot of the measures for climate emergency go hand in hand with air pollution. There are times that measures to tackle climate change can have a detrimental impact on air pollution, so it needs to be considered at the same time. For example, biomass and those kind of things can actually be negative for air pollution. So having that considered is something I'd like to suggest, please. I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
Sorry, I don't mean to be probably being incredibly thick, which nothing would surprise me after today. What was that? Did you say 2.5, Sarah?
It's the PM. So PM 2.5.
2.2.
Oh, sorry. On the actual thing. Sorry. It's recommendation.
Yeah, I have. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
So just simply add levels of non-CO2 greenhouse emissions and air pollution in the borough. Yeah.
That's what I'm asking, yeah. Just to make sure it's covered. I think Andy's got something to say.
Yes, go on, Andy.
No, it's just I think we were quite strict with ourselves, I think, in the task and finish group to stay focused purely on greenhouse gas emissions, and we deliberately made the effort not to go off into other, perhaps, related areas. And we're asking the plan to be in a certain way in the future. And my worry is that if we add on air pollution, there are other we can add on biodiversity. There's all sorts of things we can add on, and we're then getting away from the core point of this plan, which is to reduce our carbon footprint.
No, I agree. I just want to make sure that the measures that are used to tackle this aren't then detrimental to air pollution.
That's not what your change would do, though. Your change would ask for air pollution to be considered in its wider sense, and that's valid, but it's not valid in this plan, I don't think, because it would then create a situation where the plan ends up reporting a whole bunch of things which aren't actually to do the climate emergency, and we've really tried to keep the focus just on that narrow thing, because it's a massive job as it is.
Yes, yeah. Sarah, your recent motion.
That's my comment. It's up to the committee. Yeah. It's up to the committee to decide. But that's my comment.
No, and I'm happy with
Sarah.
Sorry, yeah.
Your recent motion to council, which was fully supported, I believe, that called on the council to be monitoring air pollution. So we do have a commitment that will be done.
Yeah, it
would be a separate report, wouldn't it? An annual report.
Maybe it's a change of word. Maybe I've got the wording wrong. I just want to make sure that the measures that we use for climate emergency don't impede on air pollution. So maybe it's a case of tweaking the words there, because there are some climate emergency measures that would have a detrimental effect on air pollution.
Rhiann, is air pollution a separate department, is it, from climate emergency?
It is. I mean, there are some synergies, as Sarah says. Some of the actions we do to improve air quality also helps us reduce carbon emissions. So if we're reducing idling or encouraging people not to use their cars. But I think probably what Sarah's suggesting is the unintended consequences you get. And it's not just in air quality, it's right across the scope where you do one action that seems to improve your carbon emissions, but actually it has a negative impact on something else. And perhaps that's something we could include across the whole project. There's a caveat that we're mindful that we look at each of our actions and ensure that it doesn't have unintended consequences elsewhere.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just to ensure that, really. I'm conscious there's a lot of hands up. If I just do one more and then give someone else a go and come back to me at the end, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. A more generic one then at the moment is, was any consideration as part of this given to the speed in which we reach our goal of carbon neutrality? Because obviously we have that end goal, but if we sort of trot along doing the sort of small things and then suddenly have a big gain at the end, we will have emitted a lot more carbon into the atmosphere than if we'd done some of the high ticket items first and reached our goal and doing the smaller things later. Was that a topic of discussion at all in this for this report?
I believe it was. Andrew? Andrew Withers, or don't seem to respond. Yeah, I mean, we certainly did go over that. Was there one of the recommendations that you're not happy with, Sarah, that doesn't?
I just think it's possibly the scope of this. I couldn't see anything specific to it in the report, but I was just wondering if it was considered and decided not to be put in, and if not, why not, or if it's something for further expansion.
I mean, we were trying to focus our attention on how the climate emergency plan would be monitored and scrutinised, the metrics that were being used, so that we could have confidence in that. Yeah, we did discuss, as you say, that high ticket items. There's going to be a big investment in the solar farms. But it wasn't something that came through to being a recommendation. Andy?
Yeah, I think we touched on, we looked at a method of carbon accounting, which was, I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically lifetime carbon accounting. You get the cumulative amount of carbon you can use. When we were looking at that, we then became conscious it was a totally different way of measuring carbon, and I think we wanted something which was relatively easy to understand, which is so we adopted the baseline approach, and I think a more linear thing. And the targets are per annum. So although more carbon will be given off if we don't do anything for the next 9 years, but in year 10 we're working at full velocity, if you like. That I think we took the view, given how difficult it all is and how nebulous it all is, that would actually better, given the uncertainty around actually getting 100% by year 10. So it was there, but in the fringes of our discussions, if you like.
Okay.
But we didn't make an effort to say, well, we didn't actually make that calculation. It was much more about how do we make sure all these projects are valid in terms of the numbers that they're generating.
Okay, no, so I just wanted to understand the scope and the level of discussion on that.
It was much more focused on looking at individual projects and looking at the numbers around individual projects to see if those projects added up. And yeah, it was much more about that, looking at the detail of the plan rather than that sort of how we calculate the budget. But as I said, we did make the decision to take the Department of Business baseline numbers as our starting point and use the sort of linear reduction rather than a lifetime reduction. And I know Neil seemed to be quite keen on the lifetime reduction, but I think it would have made the whole assessment of what we were trying to do as a borough much harder.
Okay, thank you.
Does that ring any bells with you, Neil?
Yes, I think if you look at the terms of reference, we were focusing hard on what's currently in the plan and actually validating whether the content and the numbers added up. I think that was the key focus. But I think, as we've said, this is an ongoing process, and we certainly start picking up some of these broader points if and when the committee decides what it decides to do as the next stage of the scrutiny of this process. Yeah,
no worries, thank you. Yeah, I will have some more later, but I'll let some other people have a go now, Alison.
Okay, Emma Hobbs.
Thank you. I actually agree with what Andy Croy is saying about 2.2. I hear what Sarah is saying, and she does have a point. I agree with that. But I think what Andy's saying is, if you read this quite carefully, I don't understand all the terms and conditions of these sort of things and all the terms of it. But I think air pollution, in my opinion, would come under something like greenhouse gases, emissions, etc. I might be wrong. So I do agree with the 2.2. With reference to the timings, I notice under 3.5, under section 3 background, that we do have some serious timings laid out and budget action plans, which is not that far away. This year's flying by, as we all know. So I don't know if that is related to what Sarah has been saying.
Sorry, Sarah, is Emma correct?
I just wanted to clarify firstly that particulates aren't greenhouse gases, so there is a point of difference there, and it is a separate area. I get that. It was just more making sure that the measures that we put in for climate change don't have that negative impact on air pollution. Most of them do go hand in hand, but there are some that don't, and that's the point I'm making, so that when we're looking at measures that we put in to deal with climate change, we're not making another aspect worse, basically.
Right. Emma, do you have another question?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle.
All right. I see on page 49 you have all the monetary sources and how much it's going to cost or how much you're estimating it to cost. My question is, how will some of the problems we're having right now affect the amount of money we have to spend on these things, first of all? And second of all, I've seen a lot of very, very nice targets and things like this, but I really would love to see the real plan. We are going to do X on Y. We're going to put photovoltaic panels up on shoot end in 2022 or something like this by December or something this order, just to have a better idea. Because otherwise, a lot of these targets and ideas are really good, but when? Exactly when? What is the actual project? I like to see actual ones. You're talking about Winner's Triangle Parkway, transportation infrastructure enhancement in the borough. Okay, what month, what year, when is it going to start, when is it going to be finished? Those kind of things. I just feel much better about having real projects and real dates. And like I said, where's the money coming from? And what will happen if we have less money? What will we have to cut?
Well, Rochelle, I don't think that was one of the terms of reference of the task and finish group. Remember, you're not scrutinising the climate emergency action plan this evening.
Yeah.
We're talking about the report and the recommendations that have come out with task and finish group. Looking at the money was not.
The money is on page 49. The money that's going to be spent is on page 49.
Yes.
As part of the report. The budget,
well, that's not a table
budget.
that we created. That's that's an annex to give you more information.
But otherwise, a lot of these points are very nice, but without concrete plans to implement them, I don't believe anything other than some more hot air or empty promises.
Are you talking about our report or the Climate Emergency Action Plan?
The Climate Emergency Action Plan. I think that it's a very good idea. There's a lot of very good recommendations.
Could we keep the focus of the meeting about the report and the recommendations that this committee will send on to the executive, please? I mean, is there a recommendation that you would amend to take on board your thinking?
I would like to see real dates on them, on when they're planning to do these recommendations and what the what the KPI will be to see whether they've actually delivered them or not.
Well, we don't know if they're going to do any of our recommendations because it's got to go to the executive for them to take up the recommendations.
If they're not going to take up the recommendations, why have we done it?
Because that's part of.
I know, but I'm just trying to say, you know, it's the case of, okay, we've got this, this, and that.
Well, we met with.
Okay.
We met with Gregor, Murray, and Rhiann, and we went through all our recommendations with them, and I have to say they were very, very well received. And so the next step, when they take it to exec, Gregor has to present reasons why the executive shouldn't accept any of these recommendations. But I hope he'll be able to support all of them. And so
I'm looking forward to a concrete plan that'll come up from the exec on how they're going to do this, do all these recommendations, I think.
Okay, thank you. Paul Fishwick.
Thank you, Alison. Ref what Sarah said about 2.2 and the air pollution. I'm happy with what Rhiann said to ensure actions are not detrimental on other areas such as air pollution. And I think that clarifies that quite well, if that could be included somewhere within the text. On page 27, 1.8, it states at the end, as such, the action plan will remain a work in progress requiring strong focus and rigorous scrutiny. I think the words need to be added in there, 6 monthly rigorous scrutiny, because that will fit in with the 6 monthly updates, which we are due to have, next one being in January 2021. And that scrutiny needs to be published well before it's taken to full council, not a couple of days beforehand, which has happened in the past.
Well, Paul, the next item on the agenda is when we'll be discussing how we should continue the scrutiny of the climate emergency plan.
All I'm suggesting is the word 6 monthly is put in there, rigorous scrutiny.
Into where?
Page 27, 1.8. Where it says,
well, that's the summary of our report. This is the report that we wrote.
Yes.
This meeting, you're not amending our report. We're inviting you to support or amend the recommendations.
I am suggesting there that the word 6 monthly should go in, because that's when we should be having these reports coming back as a recommendation then.
So is that recommendation 2.9, Paul?
2.9.
Well, that's saying we as part of the local plan, but
no, it's not 2.9. It was page 27 and 1.8.
To be honest, I mean, how often it's scrutinised is up to ONS management, and which is why in the next item we're going to be discussing how we want to continue to scrutinise this.
Okay.
So I don't think we need to put it. We don't have a recommendation actually about ONS because, you know, we decide what we're going to have oversight and scrutiny of. What we're putting forward is recommendations we want the executive to make.
Well, I would recommend that this is scrutinised on a 6 monthly basis. We can't leave it for an annual basis because that's too late. It needs to be done on a 6 monthly basis.
Well, I think that is the next item on the agenda.
I will put that in there then.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a second question?
I do have a second question. There's 5 UK authorities. This is really coming under recommendation 1. 5 UK authorities which are rated A across the world by CDP using their free resource, such as Coventry, Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole and Leicester. As Wokingham Borough looks at that to become part of that A-rated scoring system. On page, I'll leave that for Rhiann to come back on. On page 36, recommendation 3, it states, the council's key decision reports. Why not all reports? And what's the definition of a key report? So officers will look at their particular reports and what the topics are and whether that topic impacts on climate change or not.
Okay, Neil, could you give us the definition of a key decision report?
I think it's looking at reports that go to the executive or go to IEMD decisions, the ones that we have the public meetings around.
So that's the definition of key reports.
That's my definition, Paul. Obviously, if members want to broaden it out, it's just a question of where we draw the line, because we don't want every single report going everywhere to have a climate emergency section. It's just the key ones, which talking about going to the executive and spending money.
Yeah, in some cases it won't be applicable, but it's really just to ensure that whatever actions are being taken, they don't go against climate emergency.
Yes, and I think those key ones will be going to the executive or going to council or an IEMD. So those are the ones that we were thinking about.
Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, I think, Paul, the intention here was that Overview report, which currently has a statement of financial costs arising out of any council action, that we would have a similar assessment of carbon impact. It may be a lot of them don't have an impact, but we just wanted to give it the same level of prominence as we do for finances. That's the intention of this part of the report, I think, from the group.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry to butt in. Could I just add something on this point, if that's okay, Alison?
Just once.
Yeah, thanks. My thinking around this is it's really important that we have that recommendation, that thing at the bottom of our reports that considers that, but I think it should be more than that. There are certain policies that should be not just retrospectively looking and making sure that they're in line with our climate emergency policies, but actually considering them from the outset. I mean, an example would be the home to school transport policy that's been looked at. If rather than after doing it, they are looking at actually, do we tie in with the environmental stuff that we're doing? If at the very beginning of the process, they're saying, how can we at this stage make sure that this is actually embedded into what we do, that's going to be much more beneficial. And that sometimes will be for things that do come to exec and sometimes not. Not everything's going to be appropriate, but I think it needs to be part of our thinking from day one from the outset of any policy that we're looking at. That's just my thoughts.
I think that's exactly like our regard to equality, that we expect due regard to be given to equality throughout the decision-making process, and that's what we expect, is that due regard is paid to climate emergency throughout any, the whole project, from the start to the finish, and the proposal that comes forward for a decision. We want proper regard to have been paid to climate emergency. So, I mean, would you want to change the wording of 2.3, Paul?
Let me just read all of it. What page was it on again?
Page 28.
Thank you. Because I've got notes on it. Page 20, 28. Do you want to go to somebody else and I'll come back to you?
Okay. Can I just go to Andrew to give his input from a member of the Task and Finish group? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, and apologies for missing the beginning of the meeting. I've been having problems with the internet. Just picking up on Rochelle's concern about or desire to have timings attached to some of these actions. I'm just wondering, normally I would be very much against sort of trying to introduce recommendations, new recommendations on the hoof, but I'm just wondering what other members' thoughts would be on 2.11, adding a further bullet point along the lines of the annual update report includes details of key actions with timings of actions during the next 12 months. I know that's a bit clunky, but something along those lines.
Well, do you not think 2.11, the second bullet point, provide details of progress on the council's journey, including investment, procurement, and supply chains?
I think, yeah, I think it does.
Put dates into that.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, we could do that.
Well, or timing, or
yes, timings of key activities for the coming 12 months, something along those lines. But I'd be interested in hearing other members' views on that.
Andy? Andy Croy?
Sorry, I was muted, and I wanted to talk about Paul's comments on 2.3.
Oh, that's right. Andrew's taken us backwards. And now he's mastering the technology.
On that, it would be great to, and this sort of relates to Rochelle's point, it would be great to have a full schedule of all the actions that are going to happen over the next 10 years. I can't help feeling that's just not realistic at this stage. We've seen the minutes from the officers' meetings, and we've heard, you know, Gregor and Rhiannon talk, and with the best will in the world, that sort of detailed timeline I don't think is going to be possible. And if we ask for too much detail, it's just not going to be accepted by the executive. I think we need to be realistic. Some things we can ask for, and my worry is that if we ask for too much detail, we just won't get it.
Yeah, and we are all mindful this is a living document and it is going to adapt and change. So we're not expecting an absolute route map for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Some of the detail in terms of timings, I can't remember. I think some of them may have been actually in the emergency action plan, or maybe it was some of the documentation we saw. But I have seen some timings.
Yeah, so
I just can't remember.
Shall we let Rhiannon come back in at this point? Is that okay, Paul?
Sorry.
Yeah, Rhiannon.
Certainly.
Yes. Hi, yes, where we can. Oh, it looks really dark in my house, doesn't it? I haven't put the light on. Yes, where we can, we've put in timings where we know them. So, for example, there's projects that we know we want to do, we'd like to do them. It's so early on in the day, we haven't got firm timelines because there's other things that we need to get into place. And as Alison says, the whole point of this is it's not just a record of what we're doing, it's actually a tool to help us achieve what we need, so we can see where the shortfalls are, see what projects we need to add in, and as time moves on, we'll populate it and put the information in as we get it. So some of those times will become more clear as we move forward.
Sorry, Alison, can I just add, actually, looking at the actual plan that was voted for, I think, by council in July, I did have criticisms of that plan, but one of the things it does have is a fairly large number of milestones, so that there is a sense of what needs to happen in what order. The exact dates aren't there, and it would be nice if they were there, but there are quite a lot of milestones that perhaps if Rochelle wants to go and read the plan, she can see the milestones and see that there is a sense of what needs to happen. Again, the exact dates aren't there, I appreciate that, but milestones are in the plan.
Okay. Paul, did you have any? You were looking at your notes. Did you find what you wanted to ask about?
Yeah. If you just go around everybody, and if I've got something, I'll come back. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Jim because I know he's had a hand up for a while. Hello, Jim.
Just click on that. Yeah. Firstly, well done, Rhiannon, for switching the lights off. At least you're living the plan. That's good. I'd like to back up some of the comments about having some aspirational dates in there. This is not about having a confirmed set of dates that we're going to set in concrete. This is about having some aspirations to start some of these things. But enough's been said about that. My real concern is some of the baseline information we've got here. If you look at 4.2 of the report, it admits that we're looking at data from 2017, 2 years behind as a baseline. There is no doubt that COVID will have affected that baseline. So it's Recommendation 8 discusses it, and recommendation 2 in 4.4 also discusses some of the impacts of COVID. I think we have to try to get some sort of priority about understanding where we're starting from, because some of these targets we could have already met just through the unfortunate things of COVID. The other thing I'd just like to refer to is we had a plan which went from 2010 to 2020, sustainable environment. And within that, we have some of the same recommendations as we've got now. I want to make sure that if we're going to take this seriously, then which we are taking it seriously, we have to make sure that we actually deliver some of those things, because I don't think we really delivered in 2010. And my big concern is page 44, section 4.14, which is about behavioural change. If you go back to the 2010 to 2020 plan that we had as a council, there was lots of talk about trying to change behaviours. Some of the behaviours in there, I don't think we have a great deal of influence on, and I'd stand to be corrected once I see the details of the plan, but they're really, really top level wish lists of behavioural changes that are global rather than just within Wokingham, and I really can't see at this moment in time what practical actions and measured we could have on some of those things.
Sorry, Jim, have
Yep.
you not read the Climate Emergency Action Plan?
Yeah.
I mean, you just said you'd look forward to seeing it. You know, it came through full council in the summer.
I look forward to see some more of the details in the actions that we're going to do about changing behaviours, because some of the ones in there.
Well, in the report of the Task and Finish group on page 44.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're things that the Task and Finish group discussed and examined.
Yeah.
Which led to our recommendation.
And I have concerns about those.
Well, you don't agree with us, with the Task and Finish group, or
how are the task and how is the action plan going to affect people eating less meat and dairy products on a Wokingham basis?
Rhiannon, I believe some of that's going to be a lot of the behaviour change. Is the work that the council will be doing with schools and young people. I believe on the 21st there is a climate change conference for schools. Is that right, Sarah? Sorry, Rhiannon.
Yes, I think they're looking to do a conference on the 21st, and it is difficult to measure behaviour change. Actually, we know that it's absolutely essential and absolutely has to happen, but measuring it and measuring the actual impacts of, say, a series of events in terms of what that's done for our carbon, it is really, really tricky. But in there, we've got a number of projects that we're looking at, and that is one of the areas that we will be working on and really trying to strengthen. So Alison's right, we're looking to engage with schools. We're looking at projects at the moment where we can go into schools, because we know young people are our ambassadors and they will help us work and change. Business is another group that we're talking to. We've got an advisory group that we talk to. So we're talking to, we're trying to talk to people as in a collective, so that they'll go out and pass the message on from us. So towns and parishes we're talking to the charities, but it is an area, one of the areas that we really absolutely need to strengthen, and it needs a lot of feet on the ground, that area as well. So.
And Rhiannon, I wasn't around, but between the plan for 2010 to 2020 included some of those similar activities in trying to educate, but without any real measures on it. So if we're going to take those on as part of our action plan, we have to know whether what we're doing is successful or not. And I understand that measuring behaviour and behaviour change is extremely, extremely difficult.
So, Jim, is there a recommendation that you would want us to see amended?
It's not so much that the recommendation is amended, it's understanding the practicality of those recommendations. And I don't think some of them are practical.
Which ones?
I just said eat less meat, dairy products.
That's it's. If you look, I'm looking at page 28 and 29, which details the recommendations that are going to the executive.
Yeah.
So which of those recommendations are you saying are not practical?
I was looking at page 44, which is some of the more detail that goes with it.
Alison, could I?
Yes, go ahead, Andy.
I think, Jim, I think one of the things one of the reasons we and I were keen to get the carbon numbers into the plan was so we could actually see the impact of different activities on reducing our carbon. And as you said, measuring the impact of behavioural change is very, very hard. But it seems also to me, getting people to actually change their behaviour using the methods we've been using is also really, really hard. And the officers found an example of I think a school in California where assemblies had been used to try and drive down car use, and it did, but it was so marginal that it was almost immaterial. So the methods we're using for behavioural change don't really seem to be having any sort of impact. And one of the things about putting the carbon numbers against actions in the plan is we can see that, and hopefully that by putting now we've got the carbon numbers against the different actions, we can actually see the things that are worth concentrating on and not be distracted by things which are very fluffy and they sound good, but actually they won't generate any of the sorts of changes we need. Going back to the 2017 baseline thing, I think we all ended up agreeing that we need to start somewhere, and once we know what our 2017 figure is, and I think, and we agreed with the executive, and it's something I've been sort of saying for a long time, we take a baseline, and then we know what the impact of any changes we make will be. By adding up the cumulative effect of those impacts, we can see how successful the plan is. So even though the data lags, and even though there will be temporary blips like COVID, and COVID won't have changed anything fundamentally, it's given us a few months break. But fundamentally, it hasn't changed the overall carbon budget. But by measuring the impact of actions, we can determine whether or not the overall action plan has been a success. So it's not an exact science, but I think it's a fairly good one, given the resources available to the Borough Council. 2017 gives us a starting point. We know roughly what's going to happen over the 10 years. We then know the size of our carbon gap, and we know the actions that the executive is proposing to close the gap. So that, to me, given what we've got, given we've only got, I think, 2 half-heads working.
And if I come back to the question earlier about the recommendation, at those points are under recommendation 10, which establish and publish details of the amount of land available for sequestration renewable energy projects by surveying the borough in conjunction with town and parish councils to identify opportunities for tree planting, solar farms and other green projects. Yeah. And we have a whole set of things about drive less, reduce flying, eat less products, single-use plastics, which are all, I do think that they don't actually fit under that recommendation.
No, but there's a discussion around various issues, and then it's the most important points have made it to recommendations. Because at the moment, the action plan consists of a plan to have, for example, 4 solar farms. Now, if the borough doesn't have any land, the borough's got to buy land, so they're not going to happen. If the borough's got oodles of spare land, then that is a viable project. But at the moment, somebody somewhere in the borough knows how much land we've got. So in order to assess the viability of that project, we need to know how much land there is. I suspect, my gut feeling is the parishes probably won't have that much spare land. So it'll be a question of what, spare land does the borough have? It probably won't be any parks. I suspect there'll be a few farms somewhere that we're leasing to people, and it'll be a choice. Do we have farmers or do we have solar panels? You know, if we want trees, you know, the trees mentioned in the plan to build, I think it's what, 250,000 trees. To do 250,000 trees, you need an area the size of Woos Hill. You know, that's a lot of land. You know, so this is what we want to do, is to put the numbers there so that we can make a proper evaluation whether these parts of the plan are realistic or not. So it's still very rough and ready.
Don't get me wrong, Andy, I'm not against the actions. My concern is that if I come back to page 44 and Alison's asking about the recommendation, I don't believe some of those things fit in that recommendation. And
the recommendation is at the end of the note. So the recommendation that goes is recommendation 11 that follows page 44.
Right.
Just to clarify, Chairman, there isn't a recommendation about behaviour change.
No, there isn't.
The report just sets out the sort of behaviour change that is required, and then it's for the council to decide how it communicates and engages to try and deliver that behaviour change. So we don't make a recommendation specifically on that.
Yeah. I'd just like to say, Jim, I very much hope you'll join the next task and finish group if we have one on climate change.
What's that meant to me?
Because we found it quite difficult to recruit people to this one. So we would very much welcome members with a keen interest and a good eye for detail that you have. Can I go to Guy Granderson now, because he's had his hand up for a while?
Hold on, Alison. Before we move on from that, you've asked for feedback on this.
Yeah.
Which is what I've just given. So I don't think that comment.
So do you want
actually appropriate?
Do you want to add a recommendation, or do you feel that? Which recommendation would you want to change, Jim?
I'll move on to Guy. This is obviously the way that Chair is going. You've asked for feedback on this report. I've given feedback on the report, and I'm sorry, but that is not acceptable behaviour.
Well, what we're looking for, Jim, is to come to an agreement about the recommendations we want to put to the executive. So, you know, if you've got an amendment or an additional recommendation and you'd like to state that, then we will be able to discuss including that.
Which is what I was just trying to do, and I still don't believe.
Okay, so right, okay. If you just hold on, Guy. Jim, carry on.
Carry on, Guy.
Okay, Guy, do you have a question?
Okay, it's more of a stepping back a bit in regards to the comments previously about timescales, and going back to what Andy was saying in regards to the actual setting of goals and things like that. There's an element of this. This is very much questions in an interview, and that is the question of where do you see yourself in 5 years. I can guarantee that anyone who was interviewed 5 years ago and answered that question for this going forward into this year got it wrong. And effectively, I think the timescales comment is very good, and I think we should put in an element on the 2.11 bullet point 2, where basically just put in and timescales at the end of it, where it says including investment, procurement, and timescales. Sorry, including investment, procurement, supply chains, and timescales, because that way it gives us an element that we do have aspects to manage on that point. But Andy's correct that we need to make sure that this is guidelines and a statement of intent, as it were, to work to, rather than a rather rigid document, because I don't think rigidity is any good in this. The only question I had, as most of mine have now been taken, is in regards to, and this is maybe more to Rhiannon than anything else, in regards to the 6-month updates to the action plan, is to make sure that there is adequate resource to maintain that level of refresh, as it were. Because the last thing we want to do is have a 6-month plan and then get to the 6-month standard and the refresh hasn't happened, as it were.
Rianne?
Yeah, thank you, Guy. I think I have a real concern that if you look at the time it takes for us to write a fully refreshed climate emergency report with a covering report and take that to executive, I have a real fear that we'll be spending all of our time writing and refreshing the action plan rather than getting on with some of the delivery. Because this is an action plan that is linked to a strategy and key priorities for the council, we would, as a matter of course, be monitoring it every 3 months. So we'll go through all of the actions, we'll give them RAG ratings, we'll look at the timings, we'll talk to the officers and say, these are the milestones. Where are we with these milestones? What are the new milestones? What are the latest updates? And we will refresh the whole strategy. So we were going to do that anyway every 3 months. So that would give an update, to any additional scrutiny that you're thinking of introducing. And I think that would be far more fluid than asking us to do a very official 6-month update, if you like, that would be going to executive. I think that would be far more fluid. I think at the end of the day, that would give you access to much more information and give you a better idea of the path that the project is taking. What we would do with that information, we would give you, there would be a highlight report where we say these projects are on track, they're doing really well. These projects, we've got flagged as red. These are the barriers we're facing. These are perhaps the barriers we could do with some support and help in overcoming. And then you can see the picture as it emerges. So I think perhaps that would be the comments that I've got on this, basically.
Alison, could I just, sorry, Guy, also you'll notice that recommendation 2.1 or recommendation 12 is we actually recognise the resource problem that exists, especially with climate emergency expertise. And so we do think there is a very strong case for having extra resource in the climate emergency team, just to help with the delivery of this important project.
Yes, and that was the purpose of my question, Andy, because I wanted to hear it from the source, as it were. But yeah, okay, that's fair enough. That basically answers my question in that regard.
Okay, so one of my slight concerns was that I think a stronger case was being made to acquire a resource that would be focused on engagement rather than a resource that would be focused on delivery. And I would much prefer we had extra resource on delivery than engagement, and doing it rather than talking about it.
I'm done for now. Thank you, Alison.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I would support Guy's suggestion for amendment to 2.11, simply adding, and timing, supply chains and timings. It seems to me, that there's been a little bit of divergence in sort of understanding of what the purpose, of this section of the meeting is. My understanding was that it is to go through the recommendations and to make any changes, that the committee sees fit to the recommendations. I do share Jim's concerns about all the issues surrounding behavioural change. One of the suggestions that might come up in the next agenda item might be to suggest a new task and finish group to examine the challenges of initiating and sustaining behavioural change and for making appropriate recommendations. But I guess we might come up to that in the next agenda item. Unless somebody wants to have a specific or add a specific recommendation about behavioural change, I think, they should do so.
Paul?
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I was happy with what the proposal set out by Rhiann regarding the 6-monthly report, which we can discuss in the next item. Just going back to recommendation 3, what I propose would be the following wording: that the council consider the impact of climate change on all its actions and include in the council's key decision reports a section on climate emergency, and then the remainder stays as is. Thank you.
No, I would support that, Paul. I think that's a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
Neil, you're taking note of all these things, I hope.
I am, Chairman. Paul, could you put that in the chat? Then I can take it down word for word.
I will do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go off now.
Sarah.
Thank you. I've got firstly just a comment to feed through to Rhiann, and then just one little thing on one of the recommendations. Just firstly with regards to recommendation 10, which is the surveying of land in the borough. Obviously that's with regards to solar farms and tree planting and things like that. I was really pleased to see in the updates to the Dinton proposals about having the PVs on the car parks there. And I just wanted to check, are we considering what council-owned car parks we have as part of this, where something similar could be done to save us having to put it on other green space? I'm not sure if that's been considered, Rhiann.
I think we survey everywhere that we can to see if we can install solar panels. I think the issue is that there are quite a few factors that we have to take into account. So not just the cost, we look at the repayment as well. So there's a financial repayment to cover the cost of investment, which is exactly what we did at Dinton. And because that was a new build, we were able to say that it would fund itself. But there were things like the orientation and, sort of the structural, the structural soundness of the area. But we are looking at every single opportunity that we have on our own assets, for sure.
Perfect, thank you. Before I move on, I think Andy wants to say something. You're on mute, Andy.
You're muted.
The story of 2020, you're on mute.
So the task and finish didn't really, our job wasn't really to look at individual projects, and certainly tiny projects like Dinton, which just don't count in terms of the big scale of things. Our job was to look at the big items and did the numbers there, were the numbers there to start with, and if the numbers were there, did they make sense, and if they made sense, did they add up to the totals that were presented? That's what I thought. We weren't looking at tiny individual projects.
No, and this was whilst I was reading this report, it came to me, is that being considered? And while we've got Rhiann on, I just wanted to mention it. That was all. The other thing I wanted to look at was recommendation 7, which is about the modal shift, moving away from car usage where possible. And I'm really pleased with all the stuff that was written in here, because this is a really important one. This, in my view, is going to be the hardest thing to get buy-in from people for. And in the recommendation, it says, what was the word it uses? Working with neighbouring authorities, the LEP, bus and rail operators, to deliver these transport solutions. And I wonder if we should be including in there working with community stakeholders, and in particular sort of walking and cycling groups, or sustrans or sustrans, and organisations like that, to ensure that what we do put in is going to be used. And this would actually fit quite nicely with some of the proposals coming out of government at the moment. I guess I just want to expand on who we are actually engaging with in order to do this modal shift. I don't know how other people feel about that.
Andy?
Perhaps we could add in and other stakeholders after the list of operators.
That's fine.
But again, I think my feeling was we need to deal with the big organisations, but yeah, and other stakeholders covers all sorts of people, doesn't it?
Yeah, we do need to make sure that we're working with the people that are going to be using this and actually know what they're talking about as well. And actually it's part of the gear change guidance that's coming out of government at the moment that we should actually be engaging with people. I just guess I want it to be a bit more explicit because this is going to be the hardest area, I think, to get that buy-in and get that shift from people.
I like the phrase community stakeholders.
It's been used elsewhere in the report, I noticed, community stakeholders. I think it was recommendation 1. Yes, community stakeholders was in recommendation 1. So if we could just add that into 2.7, please, that would be awesome.
I would certainly support that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good plan.
Okay, Rochelle.
I would like to also ask Rhiannon, have we considered when are we going to put up things like photovoltaic panels on shoot end? Because that in itself would be a very good project from a standpoint we would show people who are actually doing this as opposed to just vaguely talking about what we want to do sometime in the future, which we may actually do sometime, but not actually sure when it will occur.
Hi, Rochelle. I'm not absolutely sure of the detail of that. I know that we will almost certainly have assessed the roof of shoot end for photovoltaic panels, and I would imagine there has been some reason that we've not been able to put them up there. That maybe because of the structural integrity of the roof or the orientation and the suitability of the roof. But I'm pretty, I mean, I don't know for sure and I can check, but I'm pretty sure that we will have assessed it and looked at that as a possibility.
Would you please?
Rhiannon, is that something you can take up with Rochelle following the meeting? If we can just keep
it is. I can find out and come back to you, Rochelle, if that's.
Thank you.
Rochelle, do you have any other comments on the recommendations?
No, because I feel some of them are vague enough right now. I still would like to see more concrete information. I'm more of an engineer, sorry.
Okay. Jim.
Yeah, if we go back to recommendation 7 that was just being talked about, with the fact that the housing numbers are going to continue to grow and maybe explode, how do we measure the behavioural change for things like the school run? Because if you're increasing the amount of traffic, we're putting in new schools in areas which don't have the top class of public transport that some other areas have. How are we going to measure the success of what we're doing? Because it's a behavioural change again.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think that level of car activity will show up in the BEIS data that we get. So if all of our new homeowners are all driving just as much as as our current residents, that will show up in the car driving data that we get at the top level. And if they don't, if they're all walking and nobody in any of the new estates ever uses the car, that will also show up. And I suspect that what will actually happen will be somewhere in between them. It was one of my concerns that the new housing hadn't been factored into the levels of car emissions going forward, but we were assured by officers that, I think it was Rhiannon actually, who said that actually the future rate of reduction in carbon consumption in the borough had taken into account the anticipated increased population of the borough. So if you go back to the Climate Emergency Action Plan, there's a graph which shows a downward slope of carbon consumption. Now, in that downward consumption, that downward slope would be steeper if it were not for the extra vehicles. And I think one of the things that Rhiannon and Gregor agreed was that future versions of the plan would make the assumptions behind that downward slope clear, so that we could see that extra housing and extra people was included in that calculation. And then if the extra housing is down at 2,000 houses over the next 10 years, then obviously we can challenge it. If it shows 15,000 or a number which is more likely, then we can say, actually, yeah, we trust that number.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, recommendation 7, you know, is we're asking for smart targets, and as Rochelle says, you know, some more very specific and achievable targets. And we did comment in the report that you know, we just weren't convinced that we would be able to achieve 50% of new vehicle registrations being electric vehicles. And there were other things that we did robustly question during our many meetings.
Alison, can I just say one other thing on that? I think at various times in this meeting that members have rightly asked about timescales, and when we were looking at the relative importance of the different projects, one of the reasons we've asked for the smart targets, and everyone knows that final smart is T, is we wanted the timescales against the switch from cars, because that's the most important part that, you know, that we could see. That is where we need to focus. Smart target against a greenway is irrelevant, because the greenways are not going to deliver any carbon savings. They're nice, everyone wants a greenway, but in terms of their impact on our carbon consumption, at the moment, they look to be almost irrelevant. So that's why I personally am not fussed about a smart target against a greenway. I am concerned that we have, or supportive of the idea we have smart targets against the switch from cars to public transport and active travel. That's, you know, what we need to focus on, and that's why we included it there, because it's, for us, that was key.
Rochelle? Rochelle? I think the meeting might have just frozen for me.
No, we're here.
Oh, right. Okay, okay. Rochelle, did you want to come back? I saw your hand up. No?
It's not up now.
Okay, well, nobody's got their hand up now. Abdul, you did have your hand up earlier. Did you want to make a point?
So, thank you, Alison. I think it's been answered through Ryan, so I'm okay there. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So my notes, Neil, if you can correct me here, are that we're looking to amend 2.7 to add and community stakeholders, and looking to revise 2.11 second bullet point, and Paul suggested and has sent in the wording, if we look at chat, for recommendation 3. Did members feel minded to add a 14th recommendation about, you know, all decisions of the council should be mindful that the climate emergency action plan doesn't have a negative impact on air pollution? That's coming back to Sarah's point.
Yes, that sounds good.
Emma? Emma, you got your hand up?
My mic's off. Oh God, this microphone thing is a nightmare.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, personally, I think that's okay. I mean, I assume everybody else is okay with that.
Jenny?
I just want to say that I agree with your statement, pulling in Sarah's comments about air pollution.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Neil? So was it the four amendments and an addition? Is that correct?
3 amendments and an addition. 2.3, 2.7 And 2.11.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. 2.3. Yeah.
Yep.
2.7, 2.11, second bullet. So have we got a wording for recommendation 2.14?
I'll put something together, Chairman, and then share it with you.
Alison,
Andy?
And Sarah, I don't have a problem with the extra recommendation, but I have to admit it's not something that I was aware would be a thing, that any measure taken to reduce carbon emissions could increase air pollution. I just wondered if Sarah could explain what it was.
Yes, there are some measures. Sorry, there's a couple of measures. There's things like encouraging things like biomass and biofuel heating for homes as well, and getting away from having gas. But that actually puts out solid pollutants into the air, so it can have a detrimental effect. There's not many measures, but there are some measures that we have to be mindful of. While most will work together, it's the heating in home.
So wood burning or
things like that, yeah. But particularly some of the measures to get to not use gas boilers are things like biomass and biofuel, and they do produce pollutants. Okay. So they would go against what we're trying to do to tackle the particulate matters.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, Paul.
Yes, I'm here. Oh, sorry, my hand's still up for some reason. Do apologise.
Okay, so Neil, can you take us through what we are going to vote to agree on the recommendations as amended?
Okay, so it's Paul's addition 2.3, which is in the chat. The text is in the chat, so everyone's had a chance to look at that.
Okay, I'll read that. The Council considered the impact of climate change on all its actions and include in the Council's key decision reports a section on climate emergency, and then the rest stands. Then on 2.7, we're adding in the words "and community stakeholders."
Yep.
At 2.11, second bullet, we are adding in including investment procurement. Well, I think we'll put including timescales, investment, procurement, supply chains. And then have you got wording for us on 2.14?
I haven't, but it will be words to the effect that action plan actions should not have a negative impact on air pollution.
Right.
But I will finesse that and send it round.
Okay, so members, if we're happy to vote. So the question is, do you?
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just on 14, could I just suggest something like the little bit of the start which Neil had, to ensure that actions are not detrimental on other areas such as air pollution. So we're not just looking at air pollution, but it could be the environment or something, some other areas such as that. So other areas such as air pollution.
Could we just say other environmental areas? Because if you put other areas, it could be impacting
I'm happy with that, Andy. Yeah, I think
that. Say a negative environmental impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
A broader. Yeah.
Happy with that.
Right, members, if you can all put your mics on, and we'll whip round to vote to accept the amended recommendations that will be sent to executive to be presented there at the October meeting. So we're all ready?
Yep.
Okay, Jenny Cheng?
In favour.
Andy Croy?
In favour.
Paul Fishwick?
In favour.
Jim Fruin?
For.
Guy Granderson?
In favour.
Sarah Kerr?
For.
Abdul Lois?
For.
Ken Mile?
For.
Andrew Mickelbar?
He's gone elsewhere.
He must have lost his internet connection.
Rochelle Shepherd-Dubé?
4.
Emma Hobbs.
4.
That's all in favour. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item, which we have already touched upon in some of our discussions. Item 35, future scrutiny of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. We need to develop an efficient, effective overview scrutiny which can hold the executive to account and ensure residents' concerns and priorities are addressed. So we have recommended. Am I looking at the wrong paper? I am. Sorry about that.
Page 51.
So we've got page.
51.
Yeah, no, I'm right. No, I am. I'm on the right page. Page 51. So we certainly found in the Task and Finish group that the plan needs ongoing support and scrutiny, and so we're setting out 3 options, but obviously members might want to suggest a 4th option, so that we can continue to, look at the plan, look at whether it's producing actions and it's having an impact, and that it's being measured correctly, so that we are able to scrutinise and whether it's ongoing, it's got to be changed, and we can suggest changes to it. So basically 3 options. One would be to establish an additional client overview and scrutiny committee. The second would be to make no changes to the overview and scrutiny committees, but that one of the committees, or this committee, would regularly scrutinise the action plan. And Rhiannon has said there will be 3 monthly reports, with RAG ratings, etc., that would be able to come to committee. And then option 3 is to maintain or refresh, is to begin a new and series perhaps of climate emergency task and finish groups. And I have to say that I think all the members of the task and finish group, we thought it worked incredibly well. There were 5 of us. It was cross-party. We talked to lots of officers. We had professors in. We thought of lots more people we would like to have spoke to, but we had 8 meetings. And of course, doing all of this on Zoom, Task and Finish works perfectly to be able to, access experts from elsewhere. So, hopefully you have all read the paper. I mean, there are some issues that if we were to set up a new committee, it wouldn't be able to start till the next municipal year. And there would be additional costs to setting up another committee. So just like to throw it open. Guy, could somebody mute their background, because it sounds like they're playing a washboard, and Guy, you are muted, so I can't hear what you're saying.
I was sorry. I think someone was scrolling through with their mouse on something. Okay. Having reviewed the report and listening to the commentaries in the previous aspect, especially when Rhiannon was answering my question on the timescales, I'm going to actually formally propose option 3. And the reasoning for that is I don't think we have the opportunity to wait in regards to next year. I'm also not yet 100% convinced in regards to a full review of overview and scrutiny function and the setting up of a new committee. I think it would be very much a semi one-trick pony right now. And I think we need to basically go for the task and finish group option. It has much. It should remain under the remit, but that allows it to have a much wider remit from the entire council, effectively. So I'd like to formally propose that.
Oh, right. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yeah, you have a seconder with me, actually, Alison. I'd like to second Guy's option 3. I agree with everything he's saying.
Okay. Rochelle?
I would like to see a little bit more in addition, to have us have regular reports to the overview and scrutiny about what's going on, as well as the task and finish group. I'd like to amend the recommendation to include regular reports to us.
To ONS management.
Yes.
So basically, Rochelle, what you're proposing, what you're suggesting is effectively that the 3-month report and that the task and finish group report at, let's say, the end of each of these meetings as part of the other matters thing, but have it as a standing line item of update from environmental task and finish group, something along those lines.
Yeah, yes, and also from the officer as well, Rhiannon.
Because the KPIs for climate emergency will be presented to us, you know, in the quarterly monitoring. But Rochelle, you'd be looking for
on a regular basis.
Additional.
Yes, even if it's nothing's happened, or that we're going to do X, Y, and Z this month, or something like this.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Rochelle. I just don't, considering what Rhiannon said earlier about in terms of timescales, I don't think it's necessarily fair to basically drag officers in every time, as it were. But if it's effectively members of the task and finish groups reporting, and then once in a while officers coming in and support, then that I completely agree with.
Every 3 months is fine as far as this goes, but we at least would get a regular report.
So that wouldn't be at every
I've got
ONS
no objection to that being.
Yeah,
it's 4 times a year.
Yeah, I've got no objection with that.
Okay.
As a standing item.
Jim.
Sorry.
Put your hand down again.
I forgot to press.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Hand was up. Option 1 is not a goer because I don't think we can wait we can't delay that length of time. My only question would be to Rhiannon and perhaps the task and finish group, which of option 2 and 3 has the least impact on the officers?
I would have thought option 3.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I think the officers' time is too valuable to waste on this. And at some point, Rhiannon, I think we need to review how you talk through reporting with red, amber and green and all the rest of it. A very old traditional and very effort heavy way of doing things. So I know they're looking at in other areas of changing some of that. So perhaps we might see if we can apply that to this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And I guess I would say again is, you know, if you look at the amount of resource we've got to deliver this project, there's one person in my team that works on this, and you know, we're really rearing to go to deliver. And the more time we spend reporting back, and I agree that reporting back is really, really important. It's essential, and it's how you're able to help us to deliver. But I think there's a point at where we may, you know, there's going to be a balance where we just need to get on and do some of the actions like engaging with people and changing behaviours and so forth. I'm really pleased that one of the recommendations in the report actually was around resource, and I think that is really, really important for a successful delivery of this. So I thank you very much for that recommendation going in, I have to say.
No problem.
I mean, Jim, we can ask the executive member to come to ONS, and we can scrutinise them about their, you know, quarterly reports. It doesn't necessarily need to be officers. We might like to see more executive members coming to be held to account.
I know that the council are trying within some of the portal activities a more agile project management style, which is something I've dealt with in my past life. And if that works there, then I think it's some of that we could actually adopt to reduce some of the pressure on the officers.
Andy.
Thanks. I mean, Guy proposed option 3, but I missed the last thing he said. I think he mentioned something about reporting back to council. Did I misunderstand that, Guy? Before I carry on with my other comments?
I was saying report back to ONS, as it were. So reporting back to management, and effectively, in regards to reporting back to council, effectively we're submitting reports for recommendation to the executive all the time, and I don't know the process if we can recommend directly to full council off the top of my head or not.
No, it was a concern. I think I'm very keen to see that there is a further task and finish group. I think one of the feelings I got from my involvement with the task and finish group is that we were actually influencing some of the work that the officers were doing. Perhaps not as much influence as I would have liked, but I think you do need a small group of people who are going to be able to look at one issue. It's not a broad thing. I mean, in this one, we just looked at numbers, and Rhiannon will, I think, be the first to admit that the first time the report came to us, the first version of the plan we saw didn't have any sort of significant carbon numbers in, and I think the existence of this task and finish group was one of the things which made sure those numbers were there. And I think any future task and finish group needs to be thinking, how can we improve the plan? How can we make the plan better? This idea, I think that and I appreciate there is an issue with resource. There's only one resource, but many of the projects we've seen are not climate. They haven't started out as climate emergency projects. There's a lot of the road building, there's a lot of stuff going on, which is happening anyway. It's not the responsibility of the climate officer to drive those through. I think it's the responsibility of the climate team, however big that team is actually to make sure these projects are viable climate projects, but also that they're measuring the impact, and they are having the impact that they need to happen, that needs to happen in order to make a difference. So the idea that someone's going to stop preparing the spreadsheet or whatever it is they use to prepare the report and is instead going to be going out and, erecting a solar panel or something, I just don't think holds up. I think it's really important that for a project of this scope and this importance, that there is proper reporting. And I think we've established there'll be quarterly reports with the RAG basis. There'll be the biannual reports. I think there's the half-yearly update and then the annual update. I think in terms of the number of reports coming in, that's fine. We don't need any more reports. And then it's up to various scrutiny committees if they want to look at those in advance. But I do think we need a task and finish group, and that's why I support Guy's proposal to go for option 3. I think option 2 is basically doing nothing, isn't it? Carry on as we are.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Andy.
So at the top, option 3 is what we need to do.
Okay, Sarah.
Thanks. I too agree that option 3 is the right thing at the moment. I did want to maybe slightly tweak that recommendation, Guy, purely because on Friday this week, there's actually 2 webinars that the LGA are holding, which is about how local authorities can scrutinise their climate emergency action plans. And with that in mind, I believe that if we set up a task and finish group, which is great, and I think this really works well this time, but we bring back this report later on in the municipal year to reconsider once we've had a further think, because we might find those of us that are attending this webinar on Friday may actually think, actually, we hadn't considered that, and it may be worth us having another think, maybe after the next task and finish group is finished, as to how we proceed with scrutiny. So it was purely just to say, yes, we do option 3 and to bring back this item at a later date to consider again, effectively, as we learn and know more.
I mean, Sarah, this task and finish group, we spent 5 months actively engaged on this. And of course, the task and finish group was set up in March, or well, maybe February, in the February meeting, because of course the lockdown with March and April delayed us getting going. I think if we agree today on how we want to go forward and members do choose option 3, I think at the next meeting in October of OS management, we would agree the terms of reference, what exactly we want that climate emergency task and finish group to look at, to sort of zoom in and look in detail at a particular area.
Yeah.
so we'd all be able to think about that. And then, so if we set the terms of reference and recruited the members at the October meeting, we'd be looking at asking them to report back in January or February, perhaps?
It depends, I guess, on what the topic is that's chosen.
Yes.
What I'm suggesting, though, is that this report, as in how we scrutinise climate emergency, is considered again at a later date. What I don't want to happen is we make this decision today to do a task and finish group, which I think is the right thing at the moment, but then we don't have this conversation. I think we need to have this conversation again further on down the line, particularly as there is some very specific training out there and information to help local authorities work out the best ways of scrutinising this. And I'm just suggesting...
So are you making a proposal that we defer this paper to the next meeting?
Yeah, whether it's to the next meeting or a later meeting, but a later meeting that we consider this paper again. But for now, we do set up a task and finish group, and I think it's definitely the right way to go.
Chair, can I just come in here quickly?
Yes, please.
As it's my proposal, as it were. Effectively, Sarah makes a valid point. Unfortunately, due to my work, I see so many WebExes and webinars. I've missed those two coming up from the LGA. So could you forward me the details at some point, Sarah, is all I ask on that. Yep. I think if effectively what you're asking for, Sarah, and how I'm interpreting this is effectively that the terms of reference are, because we need to set up this, we're approving setting up the task and finish group tonight. The terms of reference are still to be established.
I'm not talking about terms of reference at all on this, just to be clear. That's not what I'm talking about. Sorry, just to clarify, this whole agenda item 35, which is looking at how we scrutinise, whether we look at option 1, 2 or 3, is that whole report at a later date gets brought back again so that we can consider again further on. One of the reasons for not, for example, doing a committee, rightly or wrongly, is obviously we can't do anything to the next municipal year. We don't want to be waiting. That's fine. And I totally support at this moment in time having a task and finish group. What I'm talking about is this whole report comes back again at a later date for us to reconsider with the more knowledge that we have.
So basically a look again in 6 months' time, as it were, just using a random number, as opposed to that, although 6 months wouldn't work with the municipal year.
Guy, I think, so when this task and finish group reports, we'll then make a new decision about how we want to go forward.
That's effectively what I'm asking. Yes. I just want to make sure that we have this option to have this discussion again, and this is not the end of that discussion. That's all I'm asking. Okay, so
when we discuss the forward plan, we can pop that on. Andy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the part of the agenda dealing with this plan has already been passed. I think we've already agreed with amendments to send it to the executive. I don't think we should delay this plan. I think what we should do with reference to the training is if this meeting decides to set up a task and finish group, we should perhaps when we email members, I don't know if they'll be just members from this committee or from the broader membership, that we should be encouraging people to look at to attend those webinars so that they're better equipped. Because I think a lot of looking at this report isn't really scrutiny, is it? I mean, the scrutiny is all of the work that's happened over the last 5 months. This is the output of what we've done. You can't change what we've done. So to not put it forward now would just say, well, let's just scrub it and let's go back and start again. But let me finish.
Andy.
Yeah.
Sarah's happy that with the agreed recommendations that are going to accept. That's fine. That's we've drawn a line. What we're talking about now is going forward. Yeah. And I think we're all in agreement that, well, I don't know because I haven't heard from everyone, but I think we'll move to a vote to accept option 3 to establish a new task and finish group looking at the climate emergency plan. With the aim of it reporting back in to the January or February meeting, and it does depend what they're looking at as to how soon that will be. And then at that meeting, we'll make look at it anew as to how we'll move forward with scrutiny. And certainly it's great that Sarah's brought everyone's attention to the LGA session tomorrow.
fine. But just to finish, the last sentence is that if, as a result of the training we're going to do on Friday, we see stuff that needs to be changed for our next report, obviously then the next report that we do can say, actually, to the executive, we recommend this because we've seen this on the training. So nothing is fixed permanently.
Yes, and the training tomorrow will inform the way that the task and finish group is set up.
Yes.
And what it's going to look at. Right, members, if you're happy, can we move to a vote to accept option 3 as proposed by Guy, seconded by Emma? Right, so whipping round, Jenny Cheng.
Option 3.
I've lost my list.
I'm for option 3.
Andy Croy.
4.
Abdul Lois.
4.
Andrew Mickelberg.
Sorry, 4.
Emma Hobbs.
4.
Guy Granderson.
4.
Jim Fruin.
4.
Ken Mile.
4.
Paul Fishwick.
4.
Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay.
4.
And Sarah Kerr.
4.
Right, so that's all accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rhiann. We'll let you go and enjoy your evening there. Okay, moving on. Our next item is item 36, a progress report on proposed key performance indicators for 2021 and the Q1 performance monitoring report. And I believe Laura Callan is with us.
Yes, evening everyone.
At this point, Laura, I'd just like to mention that we had expected to be having a report and looking at poverty within the borough, and I did have a conversation with Keeley and Andrew Moulton this week, who explained that it was just impossible to present it to this meeting because of the data gathering. It was just not possible in this time frame, and you will be able to present that at the October meeting.
That's right, yes. Thank you. Yes, there's a lot of data to collect from around the organisation. There's various departments that are actually involved in certain interventions with poverty. What I can do, and what would be helpful, is if I could just share a slide with you all. I've just aligned what we can provide in October against what you've asked for, what's in the minutes. So if you don't mind, if I could share that, I'd really like some feedback to know that we're going in the right direction with what we're actually collecting to present at the October meeting. So I've got that ready here. If I can find it in the list. One moment. Okay, so can you all view that chart here? So you've asked for an overview and an educative session on the impact of COVID-19 on the poorest, unemployed and homeless in the borough. And so here on the left-hand side, these are the key lines of inquiry that I understand that you want us to present. And on the right, these are the key areas that I should be able to present to you in October. And so what we can look to do is aligned with the impact on the poorest and how COVID-19 has shaped poverty levels. We can provide you with overall national data on deprivation and poverty. We can provide some summary findings from various national studies that give a bit more of an in-depth look at how COVID-19 has affected poverty. And then we have got some snapshot local data that can give you a picture of actually what's happened here in the borough. In terms of unemployment, we can certainly give you some information on benefit claimants, the unemployment rate, the furlough rate, and then also the Thames Valley Local Enterprise Partnership have carried out a business recovery insights survey, and there's some good insight in that. We can certainly cover all of the areas of the council that have several interventions to either support people out of poverty or to actually prevent debt issues escalating in the first place. in terms of homelessness, we've got some information on that, and actually Simon Price, who's the head of housing, income and assessments, he's happy to come and answer questions at the next meeting if you'd welcome that. And again, for the final line of inquiry regarding Citizens Advice, the chief exec of Citizens Advice, Jake, would also be able to attend the next meeting if you would welcome that, to answer questions around that. So really, yeah, any feedback from you all on whether this looks like it's hitting the mark of what you would like to see from us, and whether you'd like those officers to attend would be useful, and I can feed back to them.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you very much, Laura. Yeah, that's certainly would be very, very useful, data. I'm just wondering also whether it might be possible to disaggregate some of the data, particularly the impact of COVID on poverty and some of the unemployment data, if it could be disaggregated by gender and age, and I don't know, possibly ethnicities, but certainly gender and age.
Okay, I can have a look at that. I've made a note, and I will update at next meeting.
Emma.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Laura. I think it would help us, especially as we are now heading for the winter months, especially with the homeless side of things. I just need to declare an interest that I have joined the Working Citizens Advice Board. Well, I will have joined by Friday of this coming week.
Okay, Laura, that was really useful because we do want to expand our understanding, and we appreciate all the work you're doing on this. Right, so let's get back to our agenda item 36. And would you like to take us through this?
Okay, yes, certainly. I can summarise. So the community vision and the strategic themes were agreed in February, and what we've done is we've created a new suite of corporate indicators aligned with the new community vision. What you can see, we've got 60 indicators here that we can present to you tonight. 36 of those were monitored last year, and they continue to align with our strategic aims, and so they're still relevant to continue monitoring for this reporting year. But there are 24 new indicators proposed for monitoring that more closely align with some of the strategic aims. So on page 57, you can see some KPIs that were monitored last year will no longer be monitored for the coming year, and that's because the indicators that we have we will be able to present to you can give much better oversight of progress against the council plan objectives, and those more granular measures will continue to be monitored within service areas, but they're not necessarily best aligned with our corporate plan as it stands at the moment. So in terms of the analysis of performance for this quarter one of this year, the overall picture shows good performance throughout quarter one, despite the significant impacts of COVID-19 that I'm sure you're well aware of in terms of the impact on council operations. So just to summarise a few of those good areas and the areas that have improved, the percentage of child protection visits completed on time has moved from red to green in quarter one. The percentage of education, health and care plan assessments has shown continuous improvement throughout the year from a very low base, but in quarter one has moved from red to amber. In adult services, safeguarding timeliness, concerns completed within 2 working days has seen a significant improvement and is now reporting green. 4 KPIs have moved from amber to green. That includes the percentage of calls answered, staff sickness has reduced within the organisation, and highway infrastructure schemes has improved, and they're now, the majority are on track for delivery or at quarter one. there are some indicators that have shown deterioration in Q1, and most of that is directly attributable to COVID-19, where it's resulted in closures on libraries, leisure centres, and slowdown in the construction industry that particularly impacted on those Q1 figures for the regeneration project, for example, and affordable housing. And so the recommendation really is to note the report and the appendices, and I'm happy to answer any questions or obviously feedback to the services, and I may need to come back to you if there's more detailed questions about performance. But thank you, Chair.
Okay, Laura, I'd just like to comment on page 65. Right, page 65 is this is what we don't like to see, an obsession with getting everything on one page. So you've made it so tiny it's quite difficult to read.
Okay.
We have had this discussion previously. I mean, this is like, what is this? Font size 7?
It's your age, Alison.
No, I'm speaking up for Prue because she's not here, and I know this is the comment that Prue always makes. I know we're trying to be paperless and we are reading it on screen, so we can make it bigger. But you know, I mean, we'd rather have it on more pages than you know, neatly fit it into one page, because this isn't just for us. This is, you know, this is public document for all of our residents to read. But overall, you know, I like the presentation and the way that you've highlighted and picked out and given very clear explanations about the reasons for some of the significant changes in the direction of travel. But I'll pass over to the members. Jim.
Sorry, slow in kicking. Laura. Last year we looked at some of the KPIs and we were talking about online processes, and one of the measures we asked for and was being looked into was the user, the residents' satisfaction with the process and how the process flowed, but also the officers' view of the process, so we could identify where we had business processes that we were doing that could be improved. So therefore focus on those that were causing the most issues. Are they at a service level now, or have they been dropped?
So we are looking at how we can better measure customer feedback on processes, and that's still in development. So we're not at a position where we can report that to you in a consistent way at the moment. But we may be able to do something later this year. So we are looking at ways of gathering that customer feedback. And then in terms of internal, are you talking about in terms of the processes that officers are using internally?
It was more from the fact that I think the topic we discussed was the blue badge as an example. It was taken as a wider view, was how did the customers find the process working through it, and because of that, what were the impacts on the officers and the people dealing with it? So if they were dealing with complaints that always said the process was flawed, or if we put a process online, which we did with Blue Badge, and then it ended up with more work in the office because of the fact that the residents were struggling with the online process. Again, that's satisfaction feedback. That way you get a two-ended view of the business process to see whether you need to change or not. And I think that was about September, October's meeting last year.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that to me sounds more that at the service level, you know, that's quite granular when you're looking at processes and you know, the quality and the performance of those processes. We wouldn't necessarily have looked to have included those in this corporate performance report. But we are looking, again, more closely at the work that goes on within customer delivery, in particular around those mediated processes. And I'm fairly confident that later possibly in time for Q2, we'll be able to give you more detailed reporting on some of that, but it may not be that the picture that you're looking for, that overall picture. What we'd like to share is much more aligned with the council plan in terms of, being able to deliver that service for our customers. But certainly, perhaps if at Q2 we can share with you what we can report on, we could perhaps look at that again and see if there's something that we're missing there that could actually cover your point.
If you could, thank you. It's just that that's the way we have data to drive any improvements we need to do, which makes it easier for both residents and for officers. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you. It's very pleasing to see improvements in a number of indicators, and there are very understandable explanations as to those where there has been some slippage. I'd like to ask two questions, if I may. The first relates to adult social services, and on page 57-58, we're told that 8 KPIs relating to adult services were removed, with replacements under development. When are these replacements likely to be operational? And can we have assurances that there won't be any gaps in the transition to the new KPIs? And secondly, a question in regards to child protection visits. This is on page 60. The child protection visits completed within 10 working days, the target's been changed downwards from 90% to 80%, quote, for corporate monitoring. Could you please explain what this means and why it has been changed? Thank you.
Yes, so for if I start with the question around the adults indicators, I would need to get an update from the service. There's one indicator that's under development at the moment, and I can provide you with an update either at next committee or before over email if you want me to do that. In terms of child protection visits, again, that's a service decision to carry out to alter that for the corporate performance monitoring. So I'm just going to scroll to the wording for that just to double check, which should be in the main body of the report as well. Sorry, one moment. Yeah, so internally, they're still aiming to achieve 90% of those visits, but for corporate performance monitoring, they felt it more appropriate to go with the 80% target. And that's because internally they want to ensure there's still that drive to ensure that that staff members are really prioritising these visits. But actually, when you're looking at creating a SMART target, it needs to be, for corporate performance monitoring, it needs to be achievable. And so they felt that by using the 80%, that was an achievable target. But internally, they're still very much driving towards the 90%, so that they can so that you've got something to aim for in the delivery of your service.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation about the child protection visits, Laura. I'm very, very happy with that. The issue with the adult services indicators, my real concern is, that there's no gap during this transition period, that, the existing current KPIs will continue until the new replacements actually become operational. So if it's possible to check that. Thank you.
I will do. Thank you.
Okay, Jim.
Sorry, that was me not taking my hand down.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you wanted to come back on something. Sarah.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And I particularly want to say thank you that the KPIs around revenue and capital monitoring have been updated now with the underspend included. So thank you very much for getting that in there. It's just a couple of things. Firstly, since all these obviously these KPIs are still being produced, has there been firstly any consideration to the need to tweak or introduce anything as a result of COVID? So as an example, obviously library usage has gone into the red for obvious reasons, but at the same time, the online usage of the service has shot up. So as an example, is that worthwhile looking at a new KPI in that area to actually encourage that further alongside the reopening of libraries maybe?
Yes, absolutely. Those KPIs in particular we are reviewing, and as you can see in some of the narrative, you know, we've made some really good progress in some of those online services, and so we really do need to look at that, particularly you know, as we start to understand how long this situation is going to continue for. It will be really valuable to monitor some of those other those new services or enhanced services that we're delivering, and so that is work that's ongoing at the moment.
Brilliant. Could I also ask if we could have some KPIs around air pollution specifically, please?
Yes, that's we definitely can do that. Something to bear in mind is that my understanding is that it will always be an annual indicator. So we were really looking to try and focus on things that we can provide on a quarterly basis, but it would still be useful for insight if we can include that in the report. So I can do that. Yeah.
No, that's fine. There are some things in here that are annual, though, already. I actually just wanted to pick up on one of them. It's PG17, which is the proportion of residents who are satisfied overall with highways in Wokingham Borough, and that's an annual indicator. I did want to query the RAG rating for this, because all it takes for green is an improvement on previous year. And if you look, last year it's 52% and this year it's 53%. That's still not very satisfied. And as it's being marked green, it doesn't necessarily automatically flag up as something we should be concerned, maybe not necessarily the right word, but it should be flagged up. So I wonder if we need to review some of the criteria that we're actually putting to the RAG rating, because it's obviously very detailed, and we can look through the whole thing. But if we could have the things of concern highlighted to us without needing to go through the report, that would be much more useful to us. That's one in particular I'd like to flag. The other one, there was a mistake actually on RA2, which is the occupancy rate for WBC owned regeneration units. It says green, but it's actually amber. So it's just a little one there. And the other one was PG6, the affordable housing completions. I don't know if there's any merit. I wonder if instead of having an actual number, we should actually have a percentage of the properties built as affordable housing. I don't know how other people feel about that, but in my mind, that would be a much more useful indicator, because it provides more context to what we're actually doing there. I don't think there's anything else. There's a couple of other things, but I'll let someone else have a go because I've made a few points there. But thank you.
Yes. Sarah, sometimes we can ask that within the notes for some things the numbers or percentages are given rather than simply the arrows.
Yeah, something needs to happen though with the affordable housing, definitely, because there's just no context, and it could be that we report it as a percentage or just something in the notes there.
I'm trying to find that. Which page is that, Sarah?
Oh, hang on. That is PG6. That's the other thing. All these names make it quite hard to find them now. That is page 73.
PG59, I think.
Sorry, the affordable houses is PG6, which
is on page 59. 70. Yeah.
Page 73.
73. Our numbers don't go up to 73, they only go to 64.
Okay, I have a
don't know what I'm looking at. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, for me it's on page 73. I'm using mods.gov. I don't know if that makes a difference.
well, yeah, I printed it off.
It's the graft. It's
oh, right, okay. Yeah. I mean, the affordable housing has been impacted by COVID building, hasn't it? But it is a very important thing that we're monitoring. So, Sarah, you were talking about, but adding on, PG24 being the per capita carbon dioxide emissions, you'd want to see something about air pollution at that point fit in that section, yeah?
Just some KPIs on air pollution.
Because they're annual, aren't they? The carbon footprint, the per capita, the carbon offsetting.
That's fine. There's no problem with it being annual. There are other annual indicators.
Yes, those the ones I mentioned are all annual. Yeah. Okay. Any other points?
I think that's it for now. I'll recheck my notes because I wrote a few, but I'll let someone else go.
Okay, Rochelle.
Okay. What KPIs are likely to be affected by our perilous financial situation based on the government's going to have problems getting the money to us or getting any money to us, and the tripling of the new cases of COVID-19, which has been occurring over the last month?
So it will be the majority of the indicators based around our finances. So it's those ones that Sarah just mentioned regarding. Let me just find the numbers for you. So it will be those on the revenue outturn. So that would be.
I'm just trying to look at the future ones that are coming out, and what do you think is going to be affected more in the next 3 months, based on what you've seen before, or what we've learned from the last COVID wave versus the one we're getting at the moment?
I mean, if specifically around finances, I would need to get the finance team to give you, a prediction of what might happen. I wouldn't be able to do that. But
no, that's okay. A report, just an email would be fine. But also on COVID, how will that be affecting all of our KPIs? And what have we learned from our pandemic that we got the first time around versus the tripling of the new cases now, and what are we doing differently? Where is it affecting it, and what are we doing differently so it won't affect us quite as badly?
Okay, so in terms of where it's going to affect us again, obviously potentially that's going to be those indicators that were affected the first time around, but it's going to be very specific to those services. In terms of what we're doing differently, we'll be reviewing constantly, and there's various groups, aren't there, that you're probably aware of in terms of our response and our recovery piece, and I think that's probably a very broad question. Again, it would be very specific to certain services, and I could certainly give you an overview of which particular indicators or that we think would be most impacted separately from the meeting. I would need to get that from the services.
Yes, that's fine. I'm just trying to find out what we've learned, how we're implementing what we've learned, and what effect it will have. In other words, if you run into a wall every time you walk in the dark, you might put a night light on so you don't run into the same wall. That kind of idea.
In October, is there a recovery report coming to Overview and Scrutiny? Neil, is that on the agenda for October? Because that may cover some of those questions.
Because the likely second wave is coming probably October, November time frame, based on most of the medical predictions at this point.
Yes, Laura, the Chief Executive is coming to the October meeting to talk about recovery, so we can pick up some of this with her at that meeting.
Okay,
that'll be fine. It's just so we can find out what and you can ask her possibly to say that what have we learned and what are we doing based on what we learned to prevent it from happening again. the problems we've occurred already.
Okay, I can certainly feed that back.
Okay, because we carry on looking at the KPIs in front of us. Okay, let's move on to Abdul.
Thank you, Alison. Hi, Laura. KPI, you've mentioned you got 14 new ones and you removed 8. It's more of a just observation, actually. These 14s, is there any particularly ones which relate to COVID-19 care homes? And you've on page 63, I see you talk about social care workers recruitment. I wonder if you could comment on these 2 aspects.
Okay, so yes, I've summarised the ones that we're no longer reporting, and the ones that that would have some connection with COVID-19. That is page 58. Again, on the Modern Gov report, if it's there. So if you're going with that, it should be page 58. So there's been changes to approaches at central government level around, for example, deprivation of liberty standards, and then alterations to transfers of care. So we used to measure delayed transfers of care, and there's been changes around that. And so that's actually impacted on what we're reporting for this year. So that's the first paragraph at the top of page 58 there. And so the service has reviewed that. And then in terms of other ones, as we touched on before, where certain KPIs have been impacted by COVID-19, we're actually going to review whether to monitor those slightly differently, like for the libraries, for example, and leisure centres, whether we're actually going to monitor some of the other enhanced services that we're putting in place. And sorry, the second part of your question, can you just repeat that to me?
Oh, so I can't even read my writing now. Was it about social worker recruitment?
Social workers recruitment?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that
on page 63? Is that Abdul?
Page 58 and 63, yeah. Well, which depends which one you're looking at. 63, go for 63, yeah, if I look at it. Yes. Is in red as well. Action
and so on page 63.
Action to resolve.
Okay, and your question around that indicator is what?
It's in red. Where are we now at the moment?
What, since quarter 1?
Since quarter 1, yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't have that information to hand. If you're very interested, I could see if we could provide something before the quarter 2 report, but I haven't got an update other than what's here in the quarter 1 report before you.
Okay, if you could, that would be great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Abdul. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm just bringing the report up. So, thank you, Laura. On page 71, I see there are 3 KPIs relating to the climate emergency. So, in no particular order, PG 25. Now, the heading there, carbon offsetting. These numbers aren't carbon offsetting numbers. These are the land use and land change and forestry numbers. So they're different from offsetting. Offsetting is where you do something elsewhere to compensate for what you're doing in your own area or in your own life if you're an individual. And this is just a measure of land use. Basically, how many trees have we got and how much farmland have we got. that's all it is. I don't really think. I think the description is misleading and probably needs to be changed. And I'm not even sure if it's a very good KPI, because that number, the 15.19, sits within the same numbers that sits within the numbers in PG22. So they're a subtotal of the numbers in PG22. So it just doesn't make any sense really to have that as a KPI. I just don't understand the rationale behind that, and I think the naming is misleading. In terms of PG22, the number you have there for 2019 actually refers to 2017. So it's the most recent number we had in 2019, but it's a 2017 number. So I think that's going to be misleading, because these are the base, the business, the government business department numbers that have been put in there. So I think that's going to be misleading. And again, I'm not sure if it's worthwhile recording that, because they're always going to lag by 2 years. So my suggestion for perhaps a more useful KPI around the climate emergency would be a measurement of how much carbon do we estimate has been taken out of the atmosphere, has not been put into the atmosphere due to the actions of due to actions arising from the climate emergency action plan. So, for example, if we build one of the solar farms, we know how much carbon that will save. So, against actual actions arising from the plan, we can calculate an estimate as to how much carbon has been changed, how much carbon is not being used, and that would be a far more useful KPI, because that, at the end of the day, is what the success of the plan is going to be measured against. So if the people running the plan aren't getting their heads around that, they really do need to be getting their heads around that. And I guess my issues with the PG24 partly follow on from the limitations in PG22, and it's historic and backward looking. I mean, we've got the last 6 years worth of data. So again, I'm not sure how useful that is as a KPI. I'm not even sure, to be honest, if a per capita CO2 emission thing is going to be useful, because we need to be focusing on the carbon we take out of the atmosphere. So I will leave my comments there at that. Thank you. Is this the point where someone tells me I was muted?
No, we got it all. Laura, do you want to respond?
I mean, I'll feed that back to Rhiannon. So Rhiannon and the team are still considering these measures, and it may be that we amend those at a relevant point. So I'll definitely make sure that that's fed back to Rhiannon, and we'll take that into account.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Thank you. Laura, if I can just go back to the page 60, CS2, where we've changed the target to make it more achievable. Something I can understand and I can fully support, but we have to be consistent if we're going to change targets in KPIs. If you go to page 63, AS7 long-term care continues over the 4 quarters, reporting in red, and we've never got anywhere near the target. Now, if we're going to change a target to make it achievable, which I can fully support, we have to be consistent in how we apply it. And if we do change a target on our corporate reporting, we need to put a great big sign across it to tell people that's what we've done. Yeah, can you see the two?
Yep. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, I can take on board the feedback to highlight to this committee where targets have been changed, to highlight it more clearly. In terms of actually developing those targets and making the choice, it really very much is the decision of the service. So I can certainly feed that back to them and bring you back some comments for.
I understand the need to get it to be an achievable target. If we do change it, even on our corporate reporting, not just reporting back to overview and scrutiny, it needs to be highlighted. And if we're going to take that approach, which, as I say, I understand, then it needs to be consistent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Could I begin by saying I think it's particularly important with these KPIs in relation to the climate emergency plan that they are that we ensure that they really are going to be durable. It's particularly important in this instance that these targets are not changed periodically, and only changed if there is a very compelling reason to do so. So this is kind of picking up on Jim's point of a moment ago. I think it's really important, that we get these KPIs for the Climate Emergency Action Plan, thoroughly sorted out before, before there's any usage of them. I do agree with Andy that the goal should really be to capture how much carbon has been taken out, of the borough as a result of actions in the Climate Emergency Action Plan. I do have problems with PG 24 as it stands, not only the fact that it's sort of historic data, but there don't seem to be any units of measurement provided there. So if it does stay, then I think the units of measurement need to be clarified. Thank you.
Right, if there's no more questions from members, we will we're recommended to note these, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time, Laura, in October, when you'll be giving us our educative overview on poverty and the impact of COVID on the less well-off in our borough. So thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, members, moving on the agenda, we're looking at the forward plan. Neil, could we share the screen and put that up, please?
I don't think I have the capability at the moment to do that, Chairman.
Oh.
Do you want me to share it?
Can we share screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
I can do it. Give me a moment.
Let me. Oh, what have I just done? A minute. Oh,
it's in modern.gov.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, this is the Executive Forward Programme. If you can just scroll that up. So, are there any things in the Executive Forward Programme that we should be adding into our overview and scrutiny at future meetings? If let's have a, that's brilliant. Who's controlling this? They're doing a great job. And the individual executive member forward plan. Okay, so, and then our work programme for our committees. So we've got a meeting. Sorry, yeah. Oh, Jim, sorry, we've got their hands up. Go on, Andy.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how I missed this. In the executive meeting on the 24th, there's a help to heat an eco scheme.
Yes.
And isn't this something which came up in the task and finish? I'm not exactly sure what this is, but it looks like something we spoke about in the task and finish group. That was the Green Bank, wasn't it? That was the Green Bank.
The eating or heating, something that Gregor was putting forward, isn't it?
If I can help, Chairman, this is the scheme where the energy suppliers have to help people on low incomes. So it is something we touched upon in the group, in the task and finish group.
Okay. And what does it involve the borough doing?
I think all we have is what's in the document, but I can get more information and send that round.
It's next week, isn't it? It's going to be too late. Yeah. Okay. I don't see what we can do before next week.
Well, if you look at the agenda for the executive,
yeah, I appreciate we can do that, but it's nothing that this committee can influence now. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so at our next meeting,
sorry, Alison, my hand was up.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry. On the executive meeting, 26th of November, we've got fees and charges as item. Would it be an idea to bring those to scrutiny before that because of the issues we had with the use of the parks for personal training, where we issued a set of charges on the Monday and then 2 or 3 days later had to withdraw them and rewrite them, just as a sanity check? Or
Chair.
Go ahead, Guy.
I believe this is going to be considered as part of the budget setting process, so it should be coming to one of the various community and corporate meetings that are coming up in the near future.
Brilliant. Thank you.
It's an appropriate forum for members to scrutinise that. That's great.
Guy. Sorry, I think also that these are the fees that will be recommended by licensing. So it will have gone through the licensing committee first before it goes to the executive.
If it is the licensing ones, you are correct, Andy. If it's if it's purview outside of licensing, it will come to community and corporate. But if it's the taxi charges and things like that as covered by licensing, you are correct.
As long as it's covered, guys, I'm happy. I was just given the debacle of training in parks. I just wanted to make sure we have all our angles covered.
I think the training in parks, there's 2 stories. There's the one which was put in public, and there was a separate email I had an officer which had a totally different story, basically based on they'd seen people running around the parks and decided to whack some charges on them. So it wouldn't be on this schedule because it was a total error, shall we say. That was the whole point. It was just a cock up.
I believe structures have been put in place, so that shouldn't ever happen again. Hands up, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. The Overview Scrutiny Management meeting on the 21st of October includes various items relating to COVID. Given the current rapidly changing situation, is there a strong case for adding a review of the latest iteration of the local outbreak management plan and for subsequent meetings of Overview Scrutiny and Management to be notified of any significant changes to that plan that might happen beyond October?
No, I think that would be an appropriate addition if you think we've managed all of those things on the agenda that evening. So we're looking at COVID recovery, COVID impact on poverty, and considering our report. Go ahead, Guy.
Basically put in to the first item, recovery plans and outbreak plan or something along those lines. Because we could be in the situation that locally we're in a good place, but nationally we're not.
Yes, let's add that. So we're looking at the recovery plan and the outbreak engagement plan. And Susan, Neil, do you know who would be invited to the meeting?
Susan's coming, but she will bring whoever she needs to bring to cover all the points. So it could be public health.
Excellent. That's good. Andy?
I have nothing else to add.
Okay, you may put your hand down then.
Oh, sorry.
Jim.
I put my hand down as well, sorry.
That's okay. So, was there anything else from the executive programme that anybody what considered that we should be looking at? So the executive are agreeing 29th of October that they'll be consulting on the council's draft housing strategy. Guys, is the housing strategy something that corporate and community are going to be looking at this year?
It's been a very long day. I honestly can't remember what's on the work programme. Neil, can you assist me here off the top of your head?
It's definitely on the scrutiny list. So it's either the management committee or community and corporate.
Because I know that we did housing last meeting in regards to COVID as well. So that was in there to an extent. Yeah, it's definitely under my committee. I can't remember what the next stage is off the top of my head. I do apologise.
No, that's all right. I mean, I'm whizzing down to it actually, but you have looked at housing.
Yeah, we looked at it, especially recently in regards to the COVID matters as well, because it was looking at how the housing team responded, as it were.
Yeah, so that's something that we would be taking forward perhaps into next year's programme about overviewing the impact of this plan. Right, so members, is there anything anybody wants to suggest for the forward programme of OS management? Now, Sarah, we did talk about there was an issue you wanted to raise at this point.
There was a couple of things that it was just I wanted to make sure that the outbreak control plan comes back to us again. It's going to be an ongoing thing. I'm not sure if that will be thoroughly covered in our next meeting, or if that's part of that whole recovery thing, or not.
If I can help, Chairman, I can ask the Chief Executive to make sure that we get a proper update on where that plan is.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And Sarah, so when we discuss the forward plan at the end of the next meeting, we can consider when to bring that back again?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, in practice, we just don't know. It's not like COVID's over. We're still constantly in the thick of it. And I guess when we set up the full programme in May, none of us thought that this would still be at the top of our agenda.
No, and it's making sure that, I mean, it's one of the biggest things, particularly is with all the issues we're seeing of track and trace at the moment, which are going on nationally and obviously infecting people locally. It's just making sure that our outbreak control plan continues to be what it needs to be going forward. So the other thing I wanted to raise was the equalities stuff that was supposed to happen in March and then didn't happen, and it seems to have slipped off any forward agenda. So we're supposed to have that under management. One of the things I wanted to raise actually is how far ahead we look. I mean, obviously, we don't want to fill up our agenda so far ahead as things change, but is it worth us having a skeleton sort of agenda for a few meetings forward where we can start to put some of these items in possibly? I don't know how feasible that is at all. Neil, I don't know what your thoughts are as well on that, but it'd be good to see where equalities is going to slot into all this.
Well, we do have that, don't we, Neil? I mean, it's just that in the agenda, we've only got the next two meetings showing, but we do have a skeleton plan for the rest of the year.
The problem is it's not on this agenda, so...
Yeah, we're all trying to be paperless, aren't we?
I think Laura is the officer working on that, so I think she's doing the poverty issue first. So we can certainly put it on for January. We can always move it around if needs be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Put it on for January. Anybody else got any points to make at this time? No. Right, so I think we've got through the agenda. Guy, do you want to say anything about corporate and community, what you've been doing recently and what you're doing next?
I think it's more of a case of what I haven't been doing recently. Okay. One aspect the committee are aware is the fact that I am formally putting in a request to and effectively to increase the amount of meetings that we are doing for community and corporate, as my Wi-Fi decides to throw a slight wobbly. And the reason for this is, as you see in the agenda, we have a large number of extraordinary meetings due to the budget reviews that we now carry out on community and corporate. We just need to basically formalise this so that we go from about 6 meetings a year to about 10, with the focus being in the autumn and winter when we're actually reviewing the budget, which I think is the more prudent thing to do rather than continually holding extraordinary, and effectively setting some dates in stone so that officers have the correct timescales to actually get programs to us. The other aspect that we have been doing is the budget will be starting as of next week for that review. We've been reviewing the COVID data, previously covering off the housing element and another element which I have temporarily forgotten because everything is blurred together into one big mess currently. And
community support, guy.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Community support, so that we can basically report back to management after the next meeting. I think we're reporting back to management. Is it October or November, Neil? I can't remember the date.
It's October.
Thank you. Again, as I said, merging together. That's basically it from what we're doing in community and corporate currently.
Okay, thank you. Ken, would you like to address us as chairman of the Health Overview and Scrutiny?
Yeah, the Health Overview and Scrutiny is had a meeting quite recently at the beginning of this week, and that was to do with care homes, which was very interesting. It was actually not held as a normal HOSC type meeting, and in hindsight, we thought there was going to be some questions asked which would allow certain homes to be identified, so we didn't want to have a public meeting. In hindsight, the officers were capable of taking all the relevant links that you could make to care homes out of the documentation, and the questions that came up didn't in any way reveal any information like that. So we're going to move that back to the normal HOSC agenda. So that will be appearing in public again. There was no need for that one to be held privately. We've got a HOSC meeting. Normally I have the HOSC meeting before the management meeting, so I've got loads of things to tell you, but the HOSC meeting is coming up later on next week, so I have more to report there. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
I have a question.
Right, go ahead.
Thank you. I can't remember. Were other members told that this meeting was going ahead, that there would be a secret meeting?
Secret isn't the right word to use. That gives the wrong impression. It was private because at the time the reports we had seen, you could quite clearly link to individual premises and people.
Okay, what I'm asking is as there was a meeting of HOSC, and normally members can sort of sit in and can go to any meeting, was this meeting secret or not?
Yeah, it was the HOSC members, and the substitutes would have been invited as well, I believe. But I don't think it was made into a public meeting of any sort.
I don't mean public. I mean other members of the council who are entitled to attend all meetings.
Yeah, I don't think we were objected in any way to any other members attending. It's just that I didn't send that email out, so I'm not 100% sure.
If we did, Ken, sorry, if we didn't know it's happening, we couldn't ask to come.
Yes.
And say my group doesn't have a representative on HOSC, so there was no question of either our representative or our substitute ever being invited and knowing this was going on.
Ah, there you go.
Given that. Given that either Rachel or I sat in a lot of the leaders' briefings that occurred through the period when the crisis was at its peak, I suspect we would have had access to background material that would have been very useful in that meeting. I think that's an opportunity lost. So just one question coming out of that then. Has the borough firmed up its approach to reclaiming some of the financial support that it had to give to some care homes?
Good question. A lot of the government contribution.
No, I mean the donations of materials we had to make to some care homes.
Yeah, the government money that was used only stayed within Wokingham Care. The 4-point-something million, which I think Wokingham allocated immediately, this was appearing to be a disaster. I think some of that was used to fund things to other groups, but they were. It wasn't a case of us offering them. I think it was a case of how we were approached, and the default answer would have been no, you can't have any of our goods. If some other group had completely run out of supplies, suppose it was masks or something, then we probably would have helped them out with a few to keep them going. Is that?
That's almost there, but certainly the background information I have is there was more than a few masks. And again, I'm not talking quantities, I'm talking values. I'm talking material support to some homes, a material amount of money.
I remember it being quite clear that the government money received, the 1.9 million.
This wasn't government money. This is what I'm saying. The background we had at the time would have been informative. I'll take it up with John Kaiser.
Yeah, the person that gave a great description of what was happening was Wesley, and he did give a very good presentation. He was very knowledgeable. It might be an idea to give him a call. But I'll also find out why you didn't receive an email.
Yeah, Ken, I know the question was asked at whether the presentation, the PowerPoint slides, whether HOSC members could share them with other councillors, and I believe what the decision was that they could.
Yes.
So I think we should certainly send those to Andy or possibly to all members of the council. Yeah. And I assume Madeline recorded the meeting for minutes taking purposes. Would it be possible for Andy, as leader of his group, to be given the recording since he wasn't able to attend the meeting?
Should I do that, Andy? Find out from Madeline what she's got.
That would be useful. I mean, I have to say it might be that we were informed and I didn't see the email, but I think I would have clocked it. So if the email was sent and I just haven't read it, I haven't seen it, then my apologies. But because we don't have a rep or a substitute, I'm sort of thinking maybe we didn't see it because this seems to be news to me.
And
I think for OS management, this is a very good point that if there's a private meeting of one of our committees, and this is quite unusual. I've not known a scrutiny meet in private like that before. Then I think democratic services need to ensure that all members are aware of that meeting to be able to ask for an invitation to observe. And I do think that's something we should pick up more because I know Malcolm Richards has wanted to be able to have the meeting on Teams, and with the complete understanding that unless you're a member of the committee, you can't speak, and invitations haven't always been issued. I don't know how. Obviously, I'm not quite sure how to go around that, Neil. But I think if any member of the council asks to be sent the invitation to the meeting, they should receive that. What do other members think?
Absolutely, Alison. Yeah, and I know. I know Gary's had an issue with if you. This is a separate thing though. That although you can watch things on YouTube, if it's a secret meeting or a private meeting, it's not going to be on YouTube.
If I can just clarify, Chairman, it wasn't a private meeting. It was a briefing for HOSC members, and my understanding was that all these briefings are open to all members. So I'll check whether that invite was sent out. But there was a presentation, and Madeline is putting together some detailed notes, so we can certainly circulate those. And if you haven't received an invitation, please accept our apologies.
I can confirm the invitation wasn't. So I was going to say the invitation wasn't sent out because I didn't receive it. I only knew about it while it was happening yesterday, just as one of my colleagues who was in it was going into it, so I wasn't aware. But just to add, obviously, I do ask to get invited to the Children's Services one, because obviously there's parts of those that are part 2, and which I obviously can't view on YouTube. So I do get invited to those. So I think any time when there is something that has a part 2 or isn't going to be live streamed on YouTube, it'd be good for us all to know about. Thanks.
It'll be nice for us to get the notes also on it.
Yeah, if I could just echo what Sarah said, particularly about meetings where there's part 2 business. I think that's really important. But is there a technical reason why, just as a matter of course, all of the councillors couldn't be automatically issued, with invitations? It seems to me that the issue is having to have to apply for an invitation to attend the meetings.
And you don't know it's happening until it's after it's happened. How are you going to apply for the invitation?
Well, we should all be receiving the weekly schedule of meetings, which actually normally includes the month. But
is it on there?
Yeah.
Including that's a secret meeting?
Briefing. I don't know about that one, but it should be in future. Alison, if it wasn't.
Alison, can I come in?
Yeah.
Hi. First of all, it wasn't a secret meeting. Absolutely, it wasn't. So that's 100% cleared. And Madeline will be giving us very shortly the notes of it. So, Andy, my question to you: do you have any specific question that Ken or myself can answer? Do you have any burning, like something you really want to know? Because let me give you 1 or 2 figures. 1.9 million was used infection control and look after our care homes, also the private ones. That's one. Secondly, 4.1 million was our own money used from Working Borough Council had handed over to care homes during these epic times. And PPP, we had so many. There was no issue whatsoever. We had so many available. We could even give it to somebody else, neighbouring, like Reading asked for it. We didn't give it.
Abdul, I'm going to interrupt you there because the briefings I was receiving from the leader in the middle of the pandemic were not telling me that story about PPP. And that the 4 million you're talking about, I suspect, was the government through funding, where we just acted as a conduit. I'm talking about a substantial sum of money that wasn't separate from the 4 million, which came from our reserves.
Yeah.
Now, unless you were told about that in the meeting, and I've noticed it sort of disappeared a little bit from other council reports where one would expect it to be seen, you wouldn't know that we effectively subsidised, and it was the right thing to do because it was saving lives, that we subsidised private care homes in the borough. That's nothing to do with government money being passed through. That's the 4 million. So it's more a question of what questions I can answer for you based on the leaders' briefings that I had, because these were in real time and we were getting them twice a week. And I think John and the 2 Johns were being very open with us. And that's why I'm thinking if I had been at this private meeting, and it was private because nobody else was invited, if I had been at that meeting, I or Rachel or any other, I think Lindsay or any of the other group leaders who went along would have had a different perspective and we could have actually added something to that meeting.
Right. I would add that Clive Jones is a member of HOSC and he did often contribute comments. Because he said he was the deputy leader of the Lib Dems, so he was at those meetings. Andy, I'm sure, hopefully Madeline can share the recording with you, and I can, well,
and the rest of us as well.
We can we can forward the slides, and Wesley will be, I'm sure, more than happy to answer any questions directly. Charles Margretz was also on the briefing, and he was very, very open with us. And I apologise to you that you weren't invited, because I'm sure that you would have had a lot to contribute. Has anybody got anything further to add at this point, or shall we close the meeting at 5 to 10? No hands up. Great. Andy, are you muted?
I'm saying close the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Just to add that
I agree too.
Yeah, the care home. So we'll be looking at COVID response all round at the next ONS, so you might be able to bring that up. Oh, Emma, how lovely to see you. Right, so thank you very much, members.
Good night, everyone.
And it'll be Pauline will be back with us next time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.